It's 9:47 p.m., a time so ordinary that it barely registers, the kind of moment where the world feels settled and predictable, where the television hums softly in the background, your phone rests nearby drawing power from the wall, and the illusion of safety feels permanent, unquestioned, almost invisible, until somewhere outside, a sharp, unfamiliar sound cuts through the night, not loud enough to explain itself, but loud enough to unsettle you, followed by another sound, and then another, until instinct takes over and your hand moves before your mind does, reaching for the phone, dialing a number you've never doubted would answer, a number built into your sense of security since childhood, a number that represents order, response, and reassurance. Except tonight it rings into silence, once, twice, and then a calm recorded voice replaces human urgency, informing you, politely, neutrally, that emergency services are unavailable. And in that moment something subtle but profound shifts. Because this isn't a scene from a movie or a distant dystopian future imagined for entertainment. This is the present, this is real, and this is what one single night looks like when the systems everyone depends on quietly step aside, leaving no sirens rushing through intersections, no uniforms arriving with authority, no external force to restore balance. Only people, neighborhoods, buildings, and choices. And as minutes stretch into hours, cities don't collapse dramatically, they change. Quietly, street by street, block by block, as uncertainty spreads faster than panic. As some people stay indoors hoping normal will return, while others step outside drawn by curiosity or concern. As neighbors who have lived side by side for years suddenly notice one another for the first time, realizing how little they know about the people closest to them. And as the night deepens, behavior begins to shift. Not because morality disappears, but because accountability becomes uncertain. And when enforcement fades, people are left with their values, their fears, and their preparedness. And you begin to see how thin the line really is between order and disorder. How much of daily life depends not on rules themselves, but on the shared belief that someone is watching, someone will respond, someone will arrive. And without that belief, every sound feels louder, every decision heavier, every interaction more meaningful. Because now choices matter immediately, whether to help, to ignore, to intervene, or to retreat. And in some places quiet cooperation emerges, neighbors sharing light, information, presence, while in other places tension grows, misunderstandings escalate, and silence becomes threatening, not because people are inherently dangerous, but because uncertainty creates space for imagination to run unchecked. And by the time the night reaches its darkest hours, it becomes clear that this story isn't about emergency systems failing, it's about what remains when they do, about how communities function when there is no backup plan, about whether people rely entirely on structures or on each other. And as dawn slowly approaches, revealing streets that still stand but feel altered, faces marked not by destruction but by exhaustion and reflection, the lesson becomes unavoidable. Preparedness is not about fear, it's about responsibility. Connection is stronger than authority. And the real foundation of any society isn't technology, or law, or response time, but the choices ordinary people make when no one is coming to save them. Because in the end, one quiet night without help doesn't end the world, it reveals it. And the only question that matters is not what happened to the city, but who you became while the systems were silent. At first, nothing feels different at all, and that's what makes this moment so dangerous. Because the lights are still on, homes glow warmly against the night, streets look familiar, the internet continues to load pages and stream videos, traffic signals blink patiently at empty intersections, and life appears to move forward as if nothing has changed, as if the systems we trust are still quietly working in the background. And most people don't notice anything wrong, because from the outside, everything still looks normal, comfortable, and predictable. But deep inside the places we never see, the places designed to respond when things go wrong, something has already stopped working, emergency operators are staring at frozen screens, call center dashboards are locked in place, dispatch systems refuse to respond, phones ring again and again without answers, not because no one cares, but because no one can reach anyone anymore. And while the public scrolls, chats, and sleeps peacefully, hospitals begin receiving patients without warning or coordination, Medical staff move quickly, but without the information they rely on. Police radios fill with overlapping voices and unanswered questions. Firefighters sit inside stations waiting for instructions that never arrive. Not panicking yet, not shouting, just waiting, because the system hasn't collapsed loudly. It hasn't exploded or shut down in a dramatic moment. Instead, it hesitates, it pauses, it delays, and that hesitation spreads quietly through every layer of the city, creating gaps where decisions should be, creating silence where certainty once lived. And this is the most dangerous phase of all, because hesitation gives people false confidence. It convinces them that help is still coming, that someone else is in control, that the delay is temporary. But systems built on speed cannot survive uncertainty, and when minutes stretch into unanswered calls, when responsibility floats without direction, when no single voice can say we're responding, the cost isn't measured in alarms or headlines. It's measured in moments lost, opportunities missed, and problems that grow just large enough to become irreversible. Because in emergencies, it's not chaos that destroys systems first. It's delay. It's waiting. It's the belief that things will fix themselves. And by the time most people realize something is wrong, the most critical time to act has already passed. In the first hour, reality doesn't arrive with an explosion. It arrives quietly, almost politely, slipping into everyday life before anyone realizes something fundamental has changed. Because at first nothing looks broken from the outside. Yet inside homes, inside streets, inside ordinary moments, something is missing. A woman sits beside her father as he grips his chest, not screaming, not dramatic, just uncomfortable enough to cause worry. She reaches for her phone, types the number she has trusted her entire life, the number that represents help, order, response, and she waits. But there is no voice on the other end, no calm reassurance, just silence. And she assumes it must be a technical issue, a brief delay, something that will correct itself in seconds. Because systems don't fail, they pause. Or so we like to believe. Across town, a shop owner hears glass shatter, a sharp sound cutting through an otherwise normal evening. He looks out and sees his window already broken. Not chaos, not crowds, just one quiet moment where something irreversible has happened. He reaches for his phone, expecting authority to answer the way it always has. But there is nothing, no response, no acknowledgement, and still, no one panics. Because panic requires certainty, and right now all anyone feels is confusion. Down a residential street, a faulty wire sparks behind a wall. A fire begins slowly, cautiously. Smoke curling upward as if unsure whether it's allowed to exist. Neighbors step outside, watching, listening, waiting for sirens that never come. And still they wait calmly, because surely someone else has already called. Surely help is already on the way, because this is how the world works, or how it used to. People keep telling themselves this is temporary, a glitch in the system, a delay that will be corrected any moment now. But while ordinary people hesitate, watching and waiting, others notice something different. Not masterminds, not cinematic villains, just ordinary opportunists who understand timing. People who live in the spaces between rules, who recognize that authority isn't present right now, that enforcement has blinked, and in that blink there is room to move. Nothing dramatic yet, no collapse, no anarchy, just small choices being made quietly in the absence of consequence. And this is how the first hour passes, not with fear, but with denial, not with riots, but with assumptions. Because the most dangerous moment in any crisis isn't when people know something is wrong. It's when they believe everything will fix itself before it's too late. When people talk about rules, they like to believe those rules come from morality, from some shared understanding of right and wrong. But the uncomfortable truth is that for most of modern society, rules exist because enforcement exists, because somewhere in the background there is an authority ready to intervene, to punish, to restore order. And when that invisible safety net quietly disappears, something shifts almost immediately, not with explosions or sirens, but with subtle changes in behavior that slowly grow louder. Arguments that would normally fade away continue without resolution. Voices rise because no one is coming to lower them. Streets that were once controlled begin to feel different, not chaotic yet, but loosened, like a grip that has relaxed just enough to be noticed. And in that space, people begin to test boundaries, not out of evil, but curiosity, impatience, frustration, and fear. And yet this moment is not defined only by disorder, because as enforcement fades, awareness replaces it. Neighbors who rarely acknowledged each other begin stepping outside, not boldly, but cautiously, exchanging glances before words. Strangers begin talking not because they trust each other, but because silence feels more dangerous than conversation. People start watching each other not with aggression, but with attention, learning patterns, noticing who belongs and who feels out of place, and slowly, fear stops being just a dividing force and becomes an organizing one, pulling people into small groups, shared routines, unspoken agreements, as communities begin to realize that safety no longer comes from a number you dial, but from the people standing beside you. And in this transition, society reveals something deeply human, that when structure weakens, people do not simply collapse into chaos. They adapt, they observe, they negotiate new boundaries, discovering that order is not something delivered from above, but something built quietly from the ground up, moment by moment, choice by choice, in the absence of certainty. When night finally settles in, the city doesn't explode into chaos all at once. It simply exhales, and that silence is what changes everything. Because darkness doesn't create danger, it reveals it. Without regular patrols on the streets, without the quiet reassurance of authority moving through neighborhoods, people begin to feel the edges of uncertainty, testing how far they can go, how much space now exists between rules and reality, and in certain vulnerable areas that uncertainty turns into disruption. Not loud at first, just signs of strain, closed shops, hurried movements, communities pulling inward, while elsewhere hospitals begin to feel the pressure. Emergency rooms filling not with panic, but with volume. Too many people, not enough time, forcing medical staff to shift into disaster protocols that were always written down, but never meant to be lived. And behind those doors, doctors are faced with decisions that no training fully prepares them for. Choices that are not about skill or intention, but about limits, about time, about resources, about deciding who can be helped immediately and who must wait. And in that moment, the idea of fairness becomes complicated, because this is where society quietly exposes its true structure, not defined by wealth, not protected by titles, not saved by reputation, but shaped by readiness, by cooperation, by whether individuals and communities prepared for uncertainty or simply assumed systems would always function. Because when the night grows deeper and help feels distant, the hierarchy that matters most is not written in law or money. It is written in awareness, in planning, and in the uncomfortable realization that resilience was never something external. It was always something people were supposed to build for themselves. The silence doesn't arrive with sirens or speeches. It arrives quietly, almost politely, without any announcement or official statement. And that's what makes it unsettling, because nothing has visibly collapsed yet. No buildings have fallen, no systems have openly failed, but the absence of sound itself becomes the signal, a strange calm where authority used to speak. And in that quiet space, people begin reacting in very different ways. Some neighborhoods slowly organizing themselves, setting up informal night watches, familiar faces standing together under dim streetlights, not out of aggression, but out of shared responsibility. While elsewhere doors are locked early, curtains pulled tight, families sitting close together hoping that stillness means safety. And as the hours pass, the digital world rushes in to fill what reality no longer explains. Timelines flood with speculation, half-truths, emotional clips, confident voices with no real knowledge. And in this environment, a single, unverified claim can travel faster than reason, reshaping behavior before anyone has time to think. Because fear spreads more efficiently than facts ever could. And somewhere in the middle of all this scrolling and watching and waiting, a realization slowly settles in, not with panic, but with a heavy clarity, that no external help is arriving to reset the situation, no authority is stepping in to restore certainty. And for the first time, many people understand that what happens next depends entirely on how individuals and communities choose to act when no one is watching, no one is guiding, and no one is coming to save them. Within it has changed forever, because this is no longer the city people went to sleep in last night. The streets are littered with broken glass that crunches under tired footsteps, Buildings carry burn marks like scars from a battle no one officially declared. And everywhere you look, faces tell the same story of exhaustion, disbelief, and survival. Yet the damage is not evenly spread, because some neighborhoods look almost untouched, their streets cleared, windows repaired, people already working together as if they had prepared for this moment without ever knowing it was coming. While only a few blocks away entire areas lie in silence, homes abandoned, shops looted, walls blackened, and the air heavy with the absence of trust, and the question naturally rises: why did some places survive while others collapsed? And the answer isn't luck, it isn't geography, and it isn't who had more resources. The answer is community, because where people knew each other, were neighbors, shared names instead of walls. They shared responsibility when systems failed. They stood watch together when no one else came. They protected children who weren't theirs, homes that weren't their own, and streets that suddenly became borders worth defending. But in places where everyone lived like strangers, where doors stayed closed and eyes looked away long before the crisis, fear moved faster than help. Panic replaced cooperation. And when pressure arrived, there was nothing holding those neighborhoods together. So they fractured, not because they were weak, but because they were alone. And in that quiet morning light, the city reveals an uncomfortable truth that no government announcement ever will. Emergency systems are not what keep societies alive. Laws are not what hold streets together. Power doesn't come from uniforms or sirens. It comes from people choosing each other. And as the sun rises higher, illuminating both the streets that survived and the ones that didn't, the city stands as a living map of human behavior, showing that when institutions disappear, the rule that matters most isn't written by the state, it's written by the community. Here's the lesson no one likes to hear, the truth we quietly avoid because it makes us uncomfortable. Society is far thinner than we think, not a solid wall of certainty, but a delicate layer of trust, habits, and shared responsibility that only feels permanent because it has never truly been tested. We grow up believing that safety is something created by systems, that dialing a number guarantees protection, that uniforms and sirens automatically bring order, but the reality is more fragile than that, because 911 does not create safety and authority alone does not create stability. They are not the source, they are the support, the beams that assist a structure already standing. When everything works, we mistake support for foundation. We assume the building is strong when in truth it is the people inside it holding it together through cooperation, restraint, empathy, and shared values. Emergency systems exist to help us, not to replace our responsibility to one another. And when those systems pause, weaken, or disappear, something revealing happens, not chaos by default, but exposure, because whatever values truly live beneath the surface are suddenly visible. In that silence, you see who helps and who hesitates, who protects and who exploits, who sees neighbors as humans and who sees them as obstacles. And that moment doesn't invent new behavior, it simply removes the mask. The biggest lie we believe is that order is enforced from above, when in reality it is maintained from within, built quietly every day through choices we barely notice until the safety net loosens. Society does not stand because someone is watching. It stands because enough people choose, again and again, to act with responsibility even when no one is forcing them to. And when the beams are gone, what remains is not the system, not the rule book, not the promise of rescue, but us, our values laid bare. Asking a question that no emergency number can answer for us. Who are we when help is no longer guaranteed? This story is not about fear. It was never meant to scare you or make you panic. It is about awareness, the kind of awareness that quietly changes how you see the world around you. Because when everything is working, when the lights are on and help is always one call away, we rarely stop to ask ourselves the difficult questions, like whether we truly know the people living next door to us, whether we have ever learned their names, their habits, or the simple fact that they exist beyond a passing greeting, and whether we could face a single night on our own if assistance did not arrive immediately, not with anger or anxiety, but with calm thinking and responsibility, because modern life has trained us to rely heavily on systems instead of skills, on services instead of self-awareness, and on convenience instead of connection. And preparedness is often misunderstood as paranoia, when in reality it is simply a quiet form of responsibility, a mindset that says I am willing to understand my surroundings, I am willing to learn, I am willing to be useful rather than helpless. Because real strength does not come from panic, noise, or force. It comes from people who remain calm, who communicate, who look out for each other without being told. And history has shown again and again that the strongest communities are not built on fear or weapons, but on trust, cooperation, and shared responsibility. Where neighbors become familiar faces, where skills are shared instead of hoarded, where awareness replaces ignorance, and where people understand that resilience is not about surviving alone, but about standing together quietly and confidently, even when no one is watching. Because in moments when systems slow down or fail, it is not chaos that decides the outcome. It is character, connection, and the simple question of whether we chose to stay aware, prepared, and human. It's 9:47 p.m., and everything still looks normal. The lights are on, screens glow softly in living rooms, traffic hums in the distance, and people scroll through their phones unaware that something invisible has already shifted. Because this is not the kind of crisis that announces itself with explosions or headlines. It begins quietly, with systems hesitating, calls taking longer, responses slowing down. And at first people assume it's a glitch, a delay, just another technical issue that will fix itself. But as minutes turn into hours, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Emergency lines fall silent. Response times stretch into nothing. And the realization begins to spread, not through official statements, but through unanswered calls, worried looks, and the growing absence of help. And this is where human behavior starts to change. Because for most of modern history, we have lived inside a safety net we rarely think about. Rules feel natural when enforcement exists, order feels permanent when someone else is responsible for maintaining it. But remove that quiet structure for even one night, and people begin to reveal who they really are. Some stay calm and help strangers, others test limits, not because they are evil, but because uncertainty creates space, and space invites instinct. As night falls, the city feels different. Streets grow quieter, yet more tense. Neighbors lock doors earlier. Communities form informal watch groups. While elsewhere people take advantage of the silence, not chaos everywhere, but enough to feel the shift. And by morning the buildings are still standing. The world hasn't ended, but something fundamental has changed. Because everyone has now experienced what it feels like when no one is guaranteed to come. And the biggest lie we believe is that society is strong by default, when in reality it is thin, held together by trust, cooperation, and systems we barely notice until they pause. And this story isn't about fear or collapse. It's about awareness, about understanding how fragile normality really is, how quickly responsibility shifts from institutions to individuals, and how in moments of uncertainty character matters more than rules. Because one night without help wouldn't destroy the world, but it would expose it, peeling back the illusion of permanence and forcing a simple, uncomfortable question. Not what would happen to society, but who you would become when there is no signal, no siren, no voice on the other end of the line, and no guarantee that someone else is coming to save you.